Hello everyone, welcome back once again with a new video. In this video we will learn Python functions. Let's see what we will cover in this session. We will cover what is a function, how we will create a function, calling a function, arguments or parameters, arbitrary arguments, passing list as arguments and some other stuff related to Python functions. Let's start. First of all, what is a Python function? A function is a block of code which only runs when it is called. That means the function will only work or execute the code within it when it is called. You can pass data, which is known as parameters, into a function. Also, a function can return data as a result. We will see later in the video. So let's start with some explanation. For a function, first we need to define a function. Look here, there is a definition for the function, that is a block of code you are seeing on the screen. We define the code within a function with a def keyword and give a name to this piece of code that is known as function name. You can call this function with its name whenever it is required in your program. To call this, you need the name of the function followed by the brackets. When this call is encountered, this calls the function name. On calling this function name in our program, this piece of code executes. Sometimes it returns some value, whatever is defined inside this piece of code, or we can say inside this function. This call is responded and function accordingly, and this piece of code is executed whenever the call is encountered for this function. It also returns the value. Let us start with how to create a function. We can create a function with def keyword. It is a reserved word. Let us take an example. This is an example where I have taken the def keyword. After this, I have given the name of my function showing in the green, which is followed by opening and closing bracket and then after a colon. This is the way in which you can define a function. Pressing the enter after it will take you inside the function where you can put your code which will be executed when your function will be called. Here I have just put a print statement with hello from a function as a text. So let us write the code for this. This is the editor which you are familiar with if you have gone through my previous videos. So start with the def keyword, which is followed by the function name. I am giving the name same as the example, my function, these opening and closing braces, and putting a colon after it. Pressing enter and we are inside this function named my function. I am writing the print statement here. I have written this simple print statement. To exit from this definition, just hit enter twice. It will exit from the function definition. Now we will look how to call a function. To call a function, first we need to define a function as we just did, and to call it, just write the name followed by these braces and pressing enter will call the function. Let us see, I have already defined the function. Now the time to call this function. I am calling this function by the function name, that is my function, and these braces. When I will press enter, the function will execute the code inside it. I am pressing enter here and you can see the code hello from my function is displaying here. as a result of calling function. Till now we have created the function and we have learned how to call a function. Functions can also have arguments. An argument is the information which can be passed into a function, or you can say the information can be passed into functions as arguments or function arguments. For example, here I have taken a function with the similar name my function, and within braces I have written fname. This fname is the function argument which you will pass on calling the function. Here I have taken the print statement within this function. Inside this print statement I have taken the fname, which is the argument passed to the function, and concatenate it with a string and close this print statement. While calling this function, I have called this function with 3 different arguments: Emily, Todd and Lucy. Let's write the code. You can see on my screen I have opened the editor. At prompt I have written the def. I have written the function name which I am going to define. Inside it I am passing the argument fname, pressing enter, writing print statement fname using plus operator for concatenation and the string reference. And now that I have defined this function same as in our example, and I am pressing enter twice to exit from this definition, now we will call this function with 3 different arguments. As I am using the interactive mode, I will run these functions one by one. While calling this function with the argument which is fname, it should add with the string in our print statement. Before pressing enter, one thing to note here is that the name of our function should be same as we have defined inside our function definition. Now I am pressing enter. You can see this has concatenated these 2 pieces within print statement inside this function definition inside my function. But this Emily, which is a string, I have passed when I called this function. Let us call this function once again with different argument. You can see this time I have written, or you can say passed, the string Krish for this argument fname inside this function, and this printed the concatenation of Krish and reference. Similarly, you can call it any number of times with this fname argument passed while calling this function. Let's take one more example. I am taking Rajat as the argument while calling this function. Pressing enter, it is resulting with the passing argument concatenated with the string reference. We have seen how to pass arguments inside a function. There are 2 terms which are used. One is parameters, another is arguments. From a function's perspective, a parameter is a variable listed inside the parentheses in the function definition. That means when we define a function, we are listing the variables which are called parameters. An argument is a value that is sent to the function when it is called. That means the argument is the value which we are passing while calling a function. Number of arguments. By default, a function must be called with the correct number of arguments. It means that if your function expects 2 arguments, you have to call the function with the 2 arguments, not more and not the less. Let's see an example. This is the example where I defined a function, my function, with two parameters f name and l name, and this function will print both the names with a space, or you can say this function will concatenate these two arguments when passed in this function, and it will put a space between these two names. If you try to call the function with 1 or 3 arguments, you will get an error. You will pass only 2 arguments inside this function while calling. Let's try to run this code. I am defining the same function with the name my function, which is having 2 arguments, f name and l name, and this function will print exactly what we have discussed in our example. I'm pressing enter twice to exit from this function definition. Now it's time to run this by calling this function with 2 arguments. I'm trying first with the 2 arguments that are needed for this function. I have passed 2 arguments. First one is Krish and second is Kaushik. Let me run this. Here we are calling this function. I'm pressing enter. You can see when I call this function, it has taken 2 arguments, Krish and Kaushik, that is separated with this space, and printed these 2. Now I am passing with this single argument Krish and pressing enter. It is giving error. It will also give error if we pass any other number of arguments. So if we try to pass other than 2 arguments, the function will give error. If you don't know how many arguments that will be passed into your function, just add an asterisk before parameter name in the function definition. Here in the example, you are seeing that I have defined a function, my function, and there is a parameter kids inside my function, but this time I don't know how many arguments will be passed into this function. So I put this asterisk before the parameter name in my function definition. In print statement, I have printed the message in the double quotes and the argument number 2 in the list of arguments passed through my function. Let us try to run this function. I am defining my function. When I put parameter, I place an asterisk before the name, pressing enter and writing the print statement, and here putting the kids and writing 2 here, which means it will take the second argument value from the list of arguments which will be passed in my function. I have written the print statement, pressing enter twice to exit from this definition. Let's try to call this function. I am passing arguments Krish, Monty and Dave. Pressing enter to see the result. You can see here that it has printed Dave in place of this kids value and the second value, because it is counting the values from 0, and it will treat Dave as the second value. That's why it has printed Dave here from the list of arguments like an array. Keyword arguments. You can also send arguments with key equals value syntax. This way the order of arguments does not matter, because you already defined the value with the corresponding key. Let's see with an example. In my function definition, I have taken 3 parameters, child 3, child 2 and child 1. While printing from this function, I have taken child3. That is the specific name of this parameter. It will print the value of this child3 taken from the function call. Here I have written the same function as discussed in our example with the three parameters child3, child2 and child1, and this child3 will be printed from these three arguments passed while calling this function. I have defined this function. Now we will call this function with three arguments. So let's try it. Passing the arguments as a key and value associated with the key. I am writing child1 here and assigning the value Emily. For second, I am taking child2 and the value for child2 is Krish, and the third argument child3, the value for child3 is Monty. I have written these arguments as a key and value. You can see the sequence is different from function definition. Now I am running this. It has printed the value associated with the key child3, which is Monty, in our print statement here. So this way you can write the keyword arguments as well. Arbitrary keyword arguments. If you don't know how many keyword arguments that will be passed into your function, just add 2 asterisks before the parameter name in the function definition. The function will receive a dictionary of arguments and can access the items accordingly. To know about dictionary, you can refer to my video Dictionaries in Python if you haven't gone through Python dictionaries before. Let us take an example. If the number of keyword arguments is unknown, this is the example, and here is the definition of my function. I have put 2 asterisks before this parameter kid inside my function, and in the print statement I am trying to print his last name is the kid's last name. This is my function definition with 2 asterisks before the parameter passed, which is kid. For kid, the passing argument L name should be printed. Let's try to run this. I have passed here 2 keyword arguments, F name and L name. For F name, I have taken value Todd. For L name, I have taken Smith. Both of these, F name and L name, are arbitrary keyword arguments. The F name has value Todd and L name has value Smith. When I run this, the value of last name associated with this argument set, the value associated with L name should be printed. Let's run this. You can see it has printed Smith, which is associated with L name. In this way we can use arbitrary keyword arguments in a function. The default parameter value. If we call the function without argument, it uses the default value which we have taken in our function definition. For example, in this function definition, I have taken country equals India. It will be treated as default parameter value if this my function will be called without any argument. So the value associated with this parameter will be executed while calling the function without argument. Let's try to run this code. In this function definition, I have taken the parameter country with the value India. it will be a default parameter value if this function is called without parameters. Now I am writing the print statement. I want to print this statement, I am from, and the value of the country which will be passed in this function. So my function is defined. Now I am calling this function by passing a parameter. I am writing Sweden here, pressing enter. You can see when I pass this Sweden, it has put Sweden as the value of the country. Now once again I am putting a value Australia inside this function as argument. I am pressing enter. It is giving the value Australia for the country. Now I am calling this function without any parameter. I am pressing enter. It has given the country name as India. This is the default value for this. If you do not pass any value, it will take India as a default parameter value. Now we will move to passing a list as an argument. You can send any data type of argument to a function like string, numbers, list, dictionary, etc. And it will be treated as the same data type inside the function. For example, if you send a list as an argument, it will still be a list when it reaches the function. For example, have a look at this function. I am passing the food, which is a data type. I am taking a for loop to iterate through the items inside food and printing each value from this food. Suppose I have a list named fruits and it is having the values apple, banana and cherry. So when I pass this fruits inside my function, it will return a list of arguments. Let's try to execute this code. This is my function definition. Now I am taking a list, fruits having values apple, banana and cherry. Now I am calling this function and passing this list as an argument and pressing enter. It resulted as a list of items carried inside the list fruits. So we can pass a list as an argument inside a function. A function can also return a value. To do this, we use the return statement. For example, while defining this function, I have taken parameter x and this function will return a value of x multiplied by 4. Whenever you call this function, it will always return the multiplication of 4 with the value of x which will be passed as an argument. Let's run the example with the similar code. I have defined the function. It's time to call this function. I am passing 3. When I will press enter, it will give the result 3 multiplied by 4. You can see 3 multiplied 4 will be 12 and this is the result. Once again, I am passing 4 here and it should give the result 16 by returning the multiplication value of 4 into 4. Let's try one more time. With argument 5, it will return 5 multiplied by 4. The pass statement. When we declare a function, the definition of the function should not be empty. But for some reason, you have a function definition with no content, you can put a pass statement to avoid getting error. If you do not put the pass statement, it will give error for this function. For example, I have defined my function and I just put a pass statement and no other content. This time it will not give error. Let's try to run this and see what happens. Here I am declaring this function and there is no content inside this function. I am just writing the pass and pressing enter. It has taken this function without content and didn't give any error. That's all for this video. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.